Okay, hit me with it. Yes.
Last week we were talking about the wealth tax, and we were trying to break down why we don't think it's a good idea, or what the problems are in that kind of perspective on it. Not just because of it as a sort of economic policy, but the kind of morals or the values underlying it. The sense of sometimes it seems like it's more of a politics of envy rather than a sound economic policy. And so maybe this week we can kind of talk about, okay, if we're not going to be generating wealth from taking money from all the rich and wealthy people in our societies, how do we create a prosperous society? Like, what's our vision of utopia? Maybe as we're thinking about the different kinds of wealth, thinking about what to talk about this week, talking about how could we create that, or how as a society can we create the right conditions for people to generate more wealth for themselves. So if it is in something like intellectual property or artistic creations, that tells me we want to create the space for people to be able to create things, and for people to be able to take ideas and then to be able to profit from those ideas. I think also, sorry, I'm going to make a big jump now, but there's another point, which was this whole idea of envy, and that I think there's an ideology that we didn't really talk about last week, which fuels this whole tax the rich thing, which is this idea that every form of wealth is built on the exploitation of other people. And once upon a time, I was having a great debate with a guy from Peru who was a sort of visiting academic, and it was part of this little group of communists that I used to know. and we were having a fierce debate about whether J.K. Rowling... Exactly. We were having a fierce debate about whether J.K. Rowling had exploited anybody in order to generate the wealth that she did out of Harry Potter. And I think, because for me, I think that example typically comes from somebody who is very wealthy from having a factory. And you can imagine like the factory workers, and they're being made to work in, terrible conditions, and they're paid virtually nothing. And this is this exploitation of their labor, which then makes this sort of the factory business owner very wealthy. But if you think of somebody like J.K. Rowling, I'm sorry, but I don't... the vision of her being like, going to her publishing company and being like, work, sell my books. And that's how she generated her wealth. So I think, that's part of this ideology that I don't agree with, or that I think misses the truth of the situation, or misses the understanding of how wealth is created. That maybe what it is it's not through exploitation, but it's through creating something really beautiful and magical, literally, in terms of a story, in terms of a product, in terms of some kind of artistic creation that is so valued and so desired that lots and lots and lots of people want to buy it and want to give you money as a response for your creation.
I think we did mention it last week also. There's a culture of tearing down, not a culture of creating and building up. And I think that's what I've been hearing you say in these last 2 points is, are you creating, well, firstly, even if you had to create environments where people could produce ideas and products and things, would people want that? And maybe that's the moral point that we were making last time, is the easy solution is give me your money, but I don't know if there's a heart of give me opportunity necessarily.
Because if it's give me opportunity, then the responsibility falls on that person to realize that opportunity. And it's so much easier to go, well, if there's an excess of money over there, I'll have some of that. I deserve to have some of that. Instead of thinking, well, is there an opportunity for me to contribute or to take part in that? And I think also that was the thing that we didn't talk about too much last week, was this idea that the money supply or wealth is limited and that there's only X amount, if you think that there's limited wealth, then of course you can believe, because I think there's the news, for example, this week that Elon Musk is going to become a trillionaire. And everybody's like, oh, this is so terrible. It's so terrible that there's a person in the world who can be a trillionaire when there's so many people who have nothing. And I think that comes from this ideology that if he has so much, it means that's the reason why those people have so little. Because it's a fixed, like it's just one pie.
He's been taking from the pie.
Exactly. Instead of this idea that actually it's a thing that grows and expands upon itself. Wealth and resources can grow and expand, instead of the fact that they are limited and there's only X amount and we can only use a little bit, and when we've used it all up, then it's all gone.
You're bringing up, I think a more interesting point is just the idea of how people think about things, which is what we started the podcast with, is challenging how people think about things, or challenging why they think about things the way that they do. So I think for me, my challenge with you potentially is always the thing of what value system are we operating from here? Like, I think that's something we do often between each other, is we have to constantly check in with our value system that we're assuming people should or ought to, when actually that's not necessarily a given. And so I think with this discussion, you're bringing up something really interesting, which is how do people think about things, and then what kind of behavior then drives them to behave the way that they do. And so I really like this idea that you've caught on to, which is, if people believe that there's only so much and then they're missing out on, instead of being able to create and generate, what would that change? So it's potentially even less a political party having policies or spaces. I think it's fundamentally an ideology that needs to shift from a poverty scarcity mindset. And I think maybe we're getting too deep here, and making big assumptions and biases, but we're not experts, so we get to say whatever we like. I think that something we underestimate with poverty are the mindsets that come with it. So never mind the habits, the behaviors, it's the things that you believe about how the world works. There's a world in which if you have something and you're not in a safe environment, people will take it from you. There's no opportunity, so you must take what you can. Take. So I also think, often I find it's people complain about how certain cultures or demographics or groups of people respond to certain things. But I think there's often a lack of compassion. Again, I think we go back to this thing of compassion and understanding that they're fundamentally operating from a mindset of survival, and that then shapes how they think about everything. And so back to your point, if you grow up in an environment where there's scarcity, and yes, you do live in a place where no more money's coming into that area, you have to just take your share, then of course you'd buy into a communist or whatever ideology that says, take your share.
Or that also it's unfair that other people have more things than you. And because, of course, if you look at your reality, you were born in the situation that you were born into. It's not necessarily your fault. I want to tell you a story. I've got a kind of practical example of what you're talking about. So if I can just summarize also what I think that you're saying is that that as much as we might also want to help people, so we might have this idealistic view of being like, well, we're going to create the conditions for people to bring themselves out of poverty, and everybody's just going to pull themselves out of poverty, and it's going to be great because we are managing it from a top-down perspective, and we completely don't take into account people's own perspectives, their own mentality. Now, the story I want to tell you is my dad was involved in a project which was out in a rural community in South Africa, and it was called it was a water project, and he comes from a financial background, and and entrepreneurship and so on. So he ran this project with this community where he convinced the community to open up a communal savings account. And he got everybody to agree that each month they would put in something like R2, which is like nothing. In terms of euros, it's a sort of 0.02 cents or 1 cent. But anyways, he convinced the community, and these all very, very poor people, and they had nothing in that community, but he convinced them to put in this monthly amount. And then through the buildup of this communal savings account, they eventually had enough money to fund a water project, in the sense that they were able to have a water system installed in the community. They had proper pipes put in. They had a kind of reservoir type of situation that was constructed, and they had clean running water, which was thanks to the money that had been put together by the community. And because they also had it in a savings account that had interest, there was interest that was accumulating on the savings account. So he was helping them to manage it and helping them to go, let's build up the savings account. We'll use the interest to then pay for different things that the community needs, and so on. And because of the water that was brought to this community, they were able to build, there was a hospital that was able to be built, or a kind of, maybe
clinic.
a clinic. And they were also able to build a school. And there was all sorts of other things that popped up as a result of the fact that they now had clean running water. Well, what happened to this project? A few years into the project, there was a senior person within the community who was looking at the savings account and thinking to himself, well, this is quite a nice pot of money that has accumulated. And one of the agreements with the community was that if they ever wanted to get their money back, they could withdraw the money. But part of that would be that everybody would have their money returned to them. So it's not like one person could pull out. It's that either everybody was involved and it was all, put together, or no one was involved. And so one of them decided that actually what they would like is they would like to have their money back, or they would like to have this accumulated growth of money that had been building in the savings account. And so he orchestrated amongst the community that they would then do that, and all of the money was pulled out of the account. And so then there was no money to maintain the water services, the hospital had to close down, the school closed, and that was the end of the project. And it was a really interesting story, a really interesting example of how, you can pull people together. You can show them
leadership.
With the right leadership, you can give them the opportunity to invest in their communities. You can show them how it needs to be done. But at some point, there's going to be personal egos, personal interests that are going to come in, and they have a different interest. Like, he wanted to enrich himself financially, was not interested necessarily in the greater benefit of society of this particular project. And so out of his own selfishness, wanted that money for himself. And it's such a shame. And because I think we would idealistically like to believe that everybody can be pulled together by this common interest in having nice things for everyone. But ultimately, there is also a kind of selfishness that we all sit with. And so that's really difficult. So this is where maybe we can kind of come up against the idealists who would like to be able to control society from a top-down perspective and like to equalize everything, would like to make everything fair for everybody, would like to redistribute the resources. But then you're fighting against individual personalities and individual human nature, which is distributed throughout society.
I think two things. One is there was that post around, well, Elon Musk has become a trillionaire, so why don't we just take his money? And then it was a carousel post on, under Biden, 1 point whatever million was spent on homelessness, and that hasn't been sold. And it just kind of went through again this thing of, even if you gave money to people, it doesn't make them responsible people. And so I think what's really sad in the example brain, what's really sad in the example that you gave is it can just take one influential person, one influential person to build something great, like we've spoken about, people who started with nothing that have built multi-million corporations and employ thousands of people. Sure, you're getting a minimum wage job because you're a minimum wage worker, but it's that or nothing. So, you have to start somewhere, and then through taking responsibility, showing, the American capitalist idea is, well, if you show that you are a person made up of certain traits, you can better yourself. That's the thing. You're not kept. Whereas other societies, I mean, you watch all those Korean Netflix dramas, and there was no moving in society. You were born a slave, you stayed a slave.
I wonder if we go back to that question of what's the ideal society from our side, so if we're kind of painting our utopia, I think that systems that are built on the understanding of human nature and moving with human nature are far more successful than this sort of idealized reforming of the human being. And so if I take this example of the water project and I go, okay, well, there is a fundamental selfishness that there is in the population, as in us as humans. We have a certain amount of self-interest that we're working with. And that's why I think that capitalism is actually quite a successful financial system, in the sense that it says, okay, if you are brave enough to take a risk on something, you see an opportunity and you pull together some resources and you aim to try and take advantage of this opportunity. And what you will get if you're successful is you will get lots and lots of money. And it takes advantage of this incentive for people to then be successful, that they can get a reward, they can get a prize out of this. Instead of systems that go, well, there's no incentive for you because you're not going to get anything out of it, because to want to get rich or to want to be wealthy is a bad thing.
Interesting.
And that's where, and I think also that's what we maybe didn't mention last week, was the idea that the wealth tax is not just almost a punishment on other people, on people who have built up a certain amount of wealth, who have sacrificed and worked really hard to create the situation that they find themselves in. But it also is a kind of message to other people, a disincentive to say, don't even bother to try and work hard in your life and to try and build up things for yourself, because at some point the government are just going to say, I'd like a piece of that. And especially if you live in a country like South Africa, where you go, well, what am I giving you this piece for? Because you're just going to use it to give to your friends and to your cronies and to your, the family. You're just going to enrich it and put it into your own pocket. So that feels incredibly unfair to me. And so then why should I try to become successful in South Africa? Because it's just going to be taken away from me. So I think that systems that are built on this understanding of human nature, to go, we will work within our own self-interest. We are motivated by the idea of getting things and getting more resources for ourselves. So then let's create a society which rewards that incentive. But the thing that I really like about capitalism is this whole idea that there was this little phrase that I had from a friend, which is that it's problem-solving money-making, and isn't it great
There's
that
you fill the need? Yeah,
exactly. There's a problem. If you can solve the problem, we'll give you a reward, right? So people then are incentivized to go out and be like, right, what are the problems in the world and how can I solve it? Like our fave, Elon Musk, he was and going back to also the whole idea about net zero, he's been somebody who's been an entrepreneur, capitalist, who has looked at the problems of things like climate change and the need for different sources of energy, the need for cleaner sources of energy. And he has really put his resources into that, but also seeing it as problems that need to be solved, that the market wants, that then he can make money from, which then he can use to put into other projects that will solve other problems. So he's solving the problem. So in terms of electric cars, so we have electric cars that don't need to be run on fuel in the same way as other cars. Or he has these big, what are they called? These big power factories. Is it solar power? Oh, I'm not quite sure what it's called. These terabyte factories, right? Power generating spaces. So I think that we want to have a society in which we are incentivized to be looking around at all the different problems and see if I can solve that problem. And if that, by solving that problem, people will pay me money. And then if I solve that problem for enough people, then I will get a great return on that risk and that investment that I made. As opposed to, what's the incentive from the communist or kind of socialist society?
I think what's so tragic is the the rationale is built on virtues that don't exist within the system. So it's this idea of, but shouldn't you want to work and contribute? Because what? If you've effectively, and this is from my perspective as a Christian, if you've effectively removed that there's a plan and purpose for your life that is given to you by God, and that, there's, I don't think you can have a nihilistic society that then expects people to be good. They don't work together.
No.
There's just something fundamentally broken. Like you remove all faith in something wonderful and deep and meaningful, and then tell people they must do purpose-driven work for something that doesn't exist.
That's so interesting. So can I ask you more about that in the sense of, so are you saying that by somebody feeling like they have a purpose which is given to them by a greater authority, and that somehow that greater authority puts a certain amount of expectation or pressure that they need to live up to this
Not
purpose?
Pressure.
Okay.
I think it's a response to. So if you believe that you have been created for a plan and a purpose, that's awesome. Then you're like, well, I wonder what that is, and I want to be part of that. That's cool,
And maybe that generates like a kind of proactive, active energy in society, as opposed to a kind of passive, like give me kind of energy in society.
Yeah, I think it's more along the lines of, well, why bother? And I think if you believe in a great creator that loves you and wants good things for you, and your response is to do good things back out of love, like a parent, you want to be good for the parent that loves you because you don't want to break their heart or make them sad. I think it's more of that kind of personal relationship with, wow, I've been created, and my response to that belief is to then not go and be crap like Pinocchio, let me not go and squander the life I've been given on meaningless things. And so I think driven by that, being driven by that is very different to being driven by a nihilistic thing, which is, well, it doesn't matter. But if it doesn't matter, then why am I going to bother studying medicine to get paid for nothing? There is something also biblical about, the Proverbs around the talents and being given talents and being given the responsibility of much. And just like loads of things, like having peace in your poverty and levels of acceptance. I think it's so different. Whereas in other ideologies, it's very much this lack of acceptance and lack of purpose, and then an expectation to somehow still deliver and work without any of that.
So how do we create the environment for people to then take advantage of the talents that they have, to be incentivized to solve problems that they see, and then to be able to enjoy the riches that they receive from those ventures, from those risks? And also, I suppose, because that sounds like it's a society built for entrepreneurs, that's built for capitalists. But what about the average person who doesn't have that personality profile? Because that's what we were talking about last time as well, the fact that people are different. And so some people are going to have that risk-taking behavior. Some people are going to have that kind of creativity that's going to be able to help them to see the problem, think of the solution, and follow that line. And other people are not like that. That's not where their talents lie. That's not where their potential lies. And so they have a different thing that they want to do. But should they be penalized for that? No. But how can we create the society in which everybody has a good baseline of living, and those who do great things will receive great rewards, and those opportunities are open to people? How do we create that?
So personally, I think people need healing first before. And I'm talking specifically in environments where there's a lot of destruction and brokenness, because those cycles those environments create mental frameworks that stop people from thriving. So giving people money, giving people education, even giving people jobs doesn't mean anything, because you look at addicts and you look at gangsters and you look at anyone who have, who are in or been exposed to, or that falls by the wayside if you don't make the internal decisions and changes that you need in order to thrive. I think I've shared U-Turn already on here, but U-Turn is a homeless organization down in Cape Town, and I had the privilege of doing some design work for them. And their system, so I've shared before, they plug into they create a network rather than try to solve everything. But the way you enter there are a couple of ways, but they all require a level of ownership. So you have to, you either get a voucher and then you can get clothing or food. So no, it's not money. You can show up and I can't remember what it's called, but it's like you tear pieces of clothing and make rugs. So you can go and earn. So they create like jobs, right? Like small jobs to earn vouchers for clothing and food. And then when you come get food, there's like I think a Bible study or a talk or just something that they actually to start gauging and filter. It's a filtering process of who's ready. So readiness. Sometimes they're just meeting immediate need, like clothing, food. Like sometimes that's all it takes for someone to get out of it. Sometimes they need community, a sense of belonging. Then if they identify people that really want to engage, they create room for people to take a bit more ownership. So helping serve food or helping lead teams of whatever the tearing thing is called. And then their next point is not rehab or whatever. It's OT and therapy. So they actually start working with people who show that they're at a level that they can engage with that stuff. Because I think sometimes people also miss the fact that readiness is a really huge part of this, is that how ready are people to change and shift out of what they know. So that's really, it was so fascinating to me, because I think he said to me, homelessness is created when people lose their jobs and their family support system crumbles. So you can have one without the other and you're fine. If you have a stable family and no job, you're still okay. If you have a job, no family, you're okay. But it's when, and what he means by the family supports, the sense of belonging, provision, purpose, all of that under family collapses because the job isn't enough. And I think that's going back to this thing of you can create systems or structures, but ultimately I think it's a spiritual, it's an internal brokenness. And that needs to be addressed before any opportunity is given.
And a mentality. It's so interesting because that helps us to, like, if we look at different countries around the world and different cultures, and there's the question of why is one country so poor and why is one country so rich? What is going on there? Because it's not necessarily the fact that one country is rich in resources and that's just why it's rich, or this country is poor in resources and that's why it's poor. Because you look at South Africa. South Africa is a resource-rich country, and yet its economy is struggling so much. There's so much inequality, so much poverty. And why is that? And if we take off the table that it's about resources, it's about education, it's about infrastructure, and we go, actually the deeper issue is its mentality,
greed.
And greed coming down to this the spiritual aspect.
Brokenness, right? So there isn't a desire, well, I've been put in a position of power, let me better my country, or even worse, I am in a position of power from another country, let me do good business and good work by partnering with this African or whatever resource wealthy resource country. Let me find ways to exploit. So again, the heart condition around wanting to exploit and then allowing exploitation or all of that. That's not good. Those are not good things.
No,
So it is on a spiritual level. So even I think what's frustrating to me, and we've brought it up before, is there's often is, but it doesn't make sense. Why would you when you could? Yes, that's called logic, but that's aligned to good things. That's aligned to godly things. Goodness, logic, and reason is God's domain. Chaos and destruction, that's not God's domain. And so when things don't make sense, then put two and two together, and it's usually not going to be a good thing. So I think that's what's so devastating about the world as well. People can sit around and we can come up with all sorts of systems and very logical, rational reasons for everyone to kumbaya together. The reality is, if you've got broken hearts and brokenness, no one's kumbayaing. There's no kumbaya.
No. But also
someone's stealing. Yeah. Someone's stealing the thing that makes the kumbaya, someone's stealing the guitar and crushing the fire and taking your words.
And withdrawing the money from the savings account because they would like to have it for themselves. Exactly. And I wonder though, if moral mental systems are able to be placed on any group of any population, like because I think that's something that I've found in discussions with Europeans about Africa, is that there's this assumption that this European system or the Western system of democracy should just function everywhere and anywhere. And and I often feel that there's a misunderstanding of how Africa has its own system. There's its own cultural way of doing things. And there's something funny about South Africa, how South Africa has been like, yeah, we'll play at democracy for a while. We'll we'll play with it, but we're going to keep our own system going on on the side here. The fact that there's the shadow council of chiefs, and we still have a very strong tribal custom that's happening. So it's almost like there's an outward public playing of democracy for the international world, but actually within South Africa, there's still the traditional tribal way of doing things. And I think that there is a very idealistic perspective, which is that, if everybody thinks the same way that we do, with the same but also from the same religious way of thinking, so the same Christian ethic, and if we just copy paste that, then everybody will experience the same wealth that we do, and so on. And maybe this is the point where we can start to make these judgments, which I know people are terrified of making, which is to go, there are some systems that are better than others. There are some belief systems that are better than others.
Just different.
But this is where I think
I'm going to challenge you on the what means better, because maybe prosperity, let's put it this way, prosperity is good for a Judeo-Christian society. Slavery and submission and control is good for other societies, right?
But don't we have we have a belief that there are things that are good and there are things that are bad. Not everything is relative.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, we do. But again, I would also say that that's outside of us. It's not just I think that there is an objective truth, I feel that there is an objective good and there is an objective evil. And I know what you're saying. I know that it's
I'm glad we're on
easy.
The same page.
Yeah, but I know it's easy.
I think you said something so key that I love in this whole talk is if we cater to human nature, and I think that trickles down into if we cater to culture, that's why I think South Africa is so interesting, because the tribal system works within society, within certain spaces. You aren't trying to put a round peg through square peg, round hole. You really are going, okay, cool. For this group of people in this context, in this area, this isn't going to work. And so you need, I think, what I would say are more bridges, more links. So you've got your chief that does ascribe to, other political capitalist values or whatever. They're the intermediate. So they understand their role is underneath another system that creates prosperity on a bigger scale. But within the smaller systems, there are ways of doing things that work for certain groups of people. So I think that's very interesting to say. We need to just cater to human nature, not play Lego. What's it, the Lego movie? Like, we cannot just glue everyone to their place and their role. We need to allow for humanity to exist and hopefully just create good enough systems to manage the good and the bad.
Yeah, because on the one hand, we want to work with human nature, but in the sense of going, these are the good things, and we want to create the environment for those good things to be incentivized. And these are the not so good things. So we want to create an environment where those don't flourish as much. Or if we're going to take advantage of those negative aspects of human nature, let's take advantage of it in such a way that it can be funneled into something that creates a good and work along those lines. But then it's also interesting. I find this question very interesting, of the sense of how far down can we go to what is a general human nature and universal to all humans. And then as we go up the different levels, what things start to become different in terms of culture, in terms of mentality, in terms of spirituality, and in terms of dynamics, and then the value judgments, which things are better, which things are worse. Maybe, we are living in this unprecedented time where all of the different cultures and ways of thinking we're all so connected, so we can start to evaluate each other in a way that we maybe weren't able to before. We're able to share resources and knowledge about the different systems that have worked. So we are able to kind of transpose different cultures and ways of thinking onto other cultures and ways of thinking, and give them the opportunity to try out this particular system. And then you can test, is this a good system as a human system, not just is this a good Western system? You can go, is this a good human system, because it taps into those deeper aspects of what it is to be human, not just what it is to be African, or what it is to be European, or what it is to be Asian. It taps into what it is to be human. And so great, then we found a system that seems to work for everybody on this human way. Let's copy paste and deploy it in all of our different countries. And so that's where I think we are at this point of we can ask that question by virtue of the fact that we are so connected and we have this bird's eye view of everything. So
I mean, I love playing devil's advocate, but I think that I also stand very firm on the fact that I do think there are systems that are for good, because they address, what I believe, which is like the inherent selfishness and the building of self versus the building of others. And I think that's where people diverge, is if they get past survival into, are the choices that I'm making purely selfish? Or am I serving others? And I think that's honestly as different as it gets. Are the people who are creating wealth and building companies, people go, oh, they're doing it for themselves. Well, they're taking care of a hell of a lot of people also.
Yeah,
they're taking the responsibility of a lot of people. They're paying for their insurance, their dental, their pension. They're caring for housing, a lot of people.
Yes.
So, sorry that they get to go overseas in a jet every now and then, when the weight of 1 million employees is on their shoulders. Yes. And I'm obviously talking about above the board companies, not
not the others.
Not the others.
There's actually, there was something that I wanted to pick up on, because you said this in the last episode, and I really liked it, that there's this, and I think is it the Christian mentality, which is that you have a responsibility to care for, not necessarily to give to, if that makes sense. You have a responsibility to care for the poor or care for those around you, but not necessarily that you are supposed to go in and fix their problems for them, that it's not about give. And so what does care for mean? And I think that comes back to our question of how, if we are designing this utopic system, that's the best system, that now, as we've been saying, maybe we've had the benefit of being able to test out a whole lot of different systems.
We all die and we go to the new kingdom.
Yeah.
That's my solution though. But yes.
But what is the best way to care for people and create the environment for human flourishing?
Well, the sad reality is, again, opportunity, but you can only take anyone so far, and then it's on them and their decision. Yes. And that's yes. I mean, that's a whole other, let's go into free will next, because that's ultimately the reality is, at some point, you can fix the world's problems. You can even cater for human nature. But at the end of the day, people do have free will and choices, and there's only so much you can do. I think the loving thing to do is at least create touch points for people if they choose to say yes to taking ownership and responsibility and becoming a full, healed, contributing, engaged person. But I think we should also cater for those who choose not to. And that's very evident. There's that little town, was it in Germany, that anarchist town where they decided to, they were like, fine, anarchy, no rules, go for it.
Nothing.
And then what happened?
Really?
This is the weirdest thing. People started bringing in rules. Because it's just, you actually just can't survive as a species if there aren't rules and systems in place. And I think that's what you're saying. And that's why I like this discussion. Like, we get to challenge each other and then kind of land on the fact that there are systems that contribute to human flourishing. And whether or not you think that flourishing looks a certain way, there is flourishing that ends well, and there is your idea of flourishing or your view of what you think you need and want that isn't good. And there are consequences that will then separate the two. And I think that's the other thing, is you deciding what is good for humanity and for you is not actually the same as what I believe, which is that God ultimately designed what was good for us. And that's evident in what people decide, because there's just natural consequences, whether you call it God or you just call it logic, reason, natural order. Like, I think ultimately what you're saying is we have evidence and information that just shows us that there are just ways that work and ways that don't work. And you can't cheat the system. I think that's kind of our point with this whole tax the rich. Cheating the system is not the same as acknowledging the fundamental responsibility you need to take as an individual for your own flourishing.
And I'd say it's not only you can't cheat the system, but you can't cheat human nature. You can't remodel humans to be something that they are not. And the whole idea that humans are like a blank slate that can just be molded into this perfect social human is, I think history has proven that is not true. And so there we go.
Yeah, here we go. I love how we get to the end of things.
Yeah. Thank you for listening to the Perspicath podcast. If you enjoy our discussions, please remember to give us a like or subscribe, and maybe share it with a friend if you think that they would enjoy it. As always, stay curious.